August 1942. A California morning. The warm fog had not yet dispersed over San Francisco Bay when the patrol airship L-8 slowly rose into the sky. It was an ordinary day for the crew, a routine flight, a standard search for Japanese submarines off the coast. The war was in its second year, and the Americans were expecting a strike from the ocean. On board were only two men, Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody, a calm, balanced commander with a perfect reputation, and his partner, Ensign Charles Ellis Adams, younger but no less experienced. Two men united by one thing, absolute trust in the sky and in each other. Their airship, silver with the U.S. Navy emblem, took off from Treasure Island Base at 6 a.m. Everything was in perfect order. The radio was on, the engine ran smoothly, the instruments were normal. Cody reported to the ground. L-8 departed en route, weather ideal, commencing patrol. And indeed, the day was quiet. Not a cloud, not a gust of wind. The ocean below shone like a mirror. In aviation, such days are called dead, too calm not to be alarming. At 0742, the L-8 spotted a dark oil slick on the water's surface. It could have been a submarine's trace, Cody reported. Investigating slick, maintaining course. The operator at the base confirmed receipt. This was the last signal received from the crew. A few minutes later, observers on the coast saw the airship descend almost to the water. Witnesses later said it hovered over the ocean as if examining something, then rose and headed southwest. Radio communication was never restored. By 9 o'clock, alarming messages began arriving at the base. L-8 was not responding. Fighters were sent to intercept. One of the pilots, Lieutenant Philip McQueen, later recalled, "It was just flying, slowly, as if someone forgot to turn off the engine, without a course, without control." The airship drifted. It rose, then fell, as if an invisible someone was pulling it by a string. On board, by all calculations, there should have been enough fuel for at least another 4 hours. At noon, residents of San Francisco noticed a strange sight. Over the houses, right over the city center, a Navy airship was moving. It was tilted, moving without direction, and looked frighteningly silent. Thousands of people came out into the streets, looked up at the sky. "There are people in there," they shouted. But in the gondola windows, there was no movement, no shadow. The airship crossed the city, brushed against the roofs of several houses, tore down power lines, but did not explode. It simply landed, slowly, softly, right in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Daly City, just 10 kilometers from San Francisco. Firefighters, military, and reporters rushed to the landing site. The airship's envelope was intact, the motor still humming. Hot air poured from the open gondola door. When the rescuers looked inside, they froze. Everything looked as if the crew had stepped out just a minute ago. A map lay on the table. The radio was working. Helmets hung in their places. Parachutes untouched. Emergency kit in place. Only one thing was out of place. No one was there. Not Cody, not Adams. No signs of a struggle. No blood, no damage. The gondola door was swung open outward, neatly, as if someone had opened it to look out, but looked out and never returned. At that moment, a journalist standing by the side whispered, "My God, they just vanished." This phrase would later appear in all the newspapers. Ghost airship lands itself. Crew vanished. And the more the military studied the insides of the machine, the scarier it became. There was not a single clue. The engine, operational. The instruments, working. The fuel, normal. The air inside, clean. The radio, on. As if someone had erased the people from the frame, leaving everything else as is. A few hours later, naval officers arrived at the site. The L-8 was declared captured by an unknown force, a wording later removed from the reports. Command announced a search along the coast. Patrol planes, boats, divers, Coast Guard, hundreds of people scoured the ocean, cliffs, and beaches. Result: 0. No trace, no body, no life vest. Emptiness. And then a short line appeared in the report. L-8 crew disappeared under unidentified circumstances. Airship landed without human involvement. But the officers who saw it with their own eyes would later say unofficially, that day the sky was too quiet, too clean, as if something simply took them. Thus began the legend of the ghost blimp, the airship that returned home by itself. By that evening, the L-8 airship stood under military police guard. There were so many people around as if a UFO had landed. Photographers, reporters, sailors, engineers. No one could believe that such a giant could travel half the state and land softly in the middle of a city without a single scratch and without a crew. The gondola smelled of hot oil and sea salt. An open route map lay on the table. A thick line led from Treasure Island along the coast to the south. Next to it, a cigarette burnt out in the ashtray, as if someone had just stepped out of the cabin. In the thermos, still warm coffee. The radio crackled. One of the instruments showed fuel pressure, normal. "This is impossible," said Navy engineer Paul Henderson, studying the instrument panel. "If there had been an accident, the control system would have burned out. Everything works." The rescue team commander, Captain Richard Freeman, looked into the hatch. The door was swung open outward, not torn off, simply opened. Outside, on the skin, no marks, no scratches. When the airship's body slowly settled on the ground, the envelope hissed and released air. Under it, cleanliness, order. The tool chest closed. Inside, 2 life jackets, both radio headsets, and parachutes. Everything in place. Nothing touched. By evening, Navy officers arrived and began the inspection. They recorded every item: the map, a knife, a notepad, documents, helmets, everything except the people. Not a single smudge of dirt. Even the boots stood in their niche. When it got dark, they turned on the spotlights. The airship was illuminated from 4 sides like a stage. Mechanics checked the valves, engineers listened to the motor. Everything perfect. And then Freeman said what would later be printed in all the newspapers: "This ship flew back by itself." A few hours later, the Pacific Fleet headquarters declared an alert. An attack by a Japanese submarine, abduction, or even sabotage was assumed. But none of the versions held up. Dozens of planes were patrolling off the coast. No signals, no signs of a fight. Not a single submarine had surfaced in those 24 hours. At dawn the next day, the search for the crew began. Patrol boats combed the waters off the coast of San Francisco. Planes flew along the fog line. On the 3rd day of the search, they found only an oil slick, the same one Cody mentioned in his last message. Analysis showed ordinary diesel fuel, not from a submarine. A week later, headquarters summed up. Both officers declared missing in action. But for those who saw the airship, it sounded not like an official phrase, but like an admission of defeat. Engineer Henderson later wrote in his diary, "Everything looked as if someone had switched the people off from reality. We looked into the cabin, and it seemed they were just transparent, like air. Nothing disturbed, but no one there." The newspapers had already called it ghost blimp. Photographs of the huge silver hull against the backdrop of suburban houses spread across the country. People peered into the dark gondola windows, trying to see shadows. The Navy desperately tried to maintain control of the situation. The press release stated, "The loss of the L-8 airship crew occurred during a patrol. No technical malfunctions identified. Investigation continues." In reality, no one understood anything. No fingerprints, no traces of going overboard, no reasons why two experienced pilots would leave the ship in the middle of the sky. It was later revealed that both officers, Cody and Adams, were family friends, had flown together for over a year, and were known for their discipline. No quarrels, health problems, or mental breakdowns. Everything perfect. And a week later, the L-8 was transported back to Treasure Island Base. Its envelope was reinflated, the engines checked. The airship soared into the air again as if nothing had happened. It flew calmly, confidently, as if really nothing had happened. At that moment, one of the technicians, watching the silver silhouette return to the sky, said quietly, "Seems like it misses its own." This phrase was remembered, because no one doubted anymore. The airship returned by itself, and the people were gone forever. And everyone who touched its sides felt a cold, as if the metal had absorbed the emptiness left by the crew. Thus ended the first week after the incident, and the real questions were just beginning. A month after the incident, the L-8 airship became the most discussed mystery in America. Its photo hung in newspapers across the country, a huge silver carcass, neatly lying on the roofs of Daly City, like a toy dropped by a godchild. For the public, it was not just an incident. War, fear of submarines, the unknown, all woven into one mystical story where technology seemed alive and people vanished without a trace. The Navy created a commission. It was led by Captain Arthur Redley, a dry, pedantic officer who did not believe in miracles. His people took the gondola apart down to the screw, measured every valve, every bolt. No signs of decompression, no breakdowns, no damage to the envelope. The radio worked perfectly. The air in the cabin was normal. Pressure, as in a textbook. Everything indicated the crew had not the slightest reason to leave the vessel. The report stated, with 99% probability, the airship was in working condition until the moment of landing. But then, where are the people? Redley gathered all the engineers. They built theories. First, an accident near the sea. One went out to check a valve, the second tried to help, and both were blown away by the wind. But the wind that day was less than 3 knots. Impossible. Second, an attack by a Japanese submarine. But not a single shot, not a single signal was recorded off the coast. Third, suicide, panic, a quarrel. But the doctors knew both officers, stable, balanced, no depression. Someone quietly suggested, maybe they just disappeared. Laughter, but uncertain. That evening, Redley stayed in the hangar alone. The L-8 hung under the ceiling, already partially restored, gently swaying in the air currents. The officer looked at it for a long time, then said to his assistant, "When you look at it, you feel like someone else is here, just not visible." This phrase made it into the newspapers. A few weeks later, strange things began. Technicians working on the airship complained. Instruments suddenly turn on by themselves. The radio picks up extraneous voices, like old transmissions from the past. One mechanic insisted he heard the phrase, "investigating slick, maintaining course." Cody's last radio transmission. Another claimed he saw the reflection of people in the gondola window, although the hangar was empty. Officially, it was all attributed to fatigue and superstition. Unofficially, The Navy moved the L-8 to a closed hangar at Moffett Field Base to finish the examination without press attention. But rumors had already spread along the entire West Coast. The airship that returned by itself. Newspapers wrote about a curse, about a sea of ghosts, about a mysterious water slick that seemed to drag the crew into another world. Radio shows held night broadcasts where witnesses told of seeing a glowing ball in the sky and hearing voices from the clouds. The Navy was angry, but secretly encouraged the interest. Panic was worse than rumors, and a legend was a convenient cover. Meanwhile, the airship itself was tested again. On September 8, 1942, just 3 weeks after the incident, the L-8 rose into the air again. On board, a new crew. The flight proceeded without incident, but everyone on that flight later said the same thing. There was a feeling that someone was sitting in the back, invisible but present. One of the pilots, Frank Sloan, later confessed to journalists, "When I turned on the radio, a crackle came from the speakers, and in the hiss I clearly heard a voice, maintaining course. I turned off the comms, but the chills down my spine remained to this day." Command ordered not to discuss this incident. Thus, the L-8 airship became a living legend. At every airfield, posters with its photo and the inscription now stood, "Keep the door closed. Return not alone." And the names of Cody and Adams were entered into the list of heroes missing in action. Their families received letters, without a body, without an explanation, only the formula. Served valiantly, vanished into thin air. But sailors and pilots knew otherwise. Sometimes the sky takes those who trusted the wind too much. And if you look up at night, you can see the silver silhouette of an airship sailing in the clouds over the Pacific Ocean. It goes on its route, as it did 80 years ago, without a crew, without a sound, but still on the air. Years passed. The war ended, but the story of the ghost airship L-8 never released its grip on the pilots, engineers, or those who had ever heard of it. In Navy reports, it was listed as an ordinary aircraft, but among crews and technicians, it was spoken of in a whisper, as if it were alive. Its envelope was patched, its engines checked, and it flew again, now for training purposes, over the same bays where its first crew had once disappeared. The first years were quiet, until a strange incident in 1943. A cadet, performing a check, opened the gondola door at altitude and lost consciousness a few seconds later. He was barely pulled out in time. Later, he said he felt as if someone was standing right behind him, watching the back of his head. After this incident, going up in the L-8 without an instructor was banned at the base. Rumors multiplied. Technicians claimed that sometimes when the lights went out in the hangar, a faint radio crackle could be heard from the gondola, even though it was disconnected from power. Some swore they saw two silhouettes in pilot uniforms in the porthole. And every time the airship rose into the air, someone in the crowd would unconsciously count. 1, 2, as if checking if everyone was on board. In 1944, Command decided to change its designation. It was now listed not as L-8, but as TC-22, Training Craft. They wanted to erase the old story, but no one called it by the new name. For everyone, it remained the same, Ghost Blimp. After the war, it was transferred to civil aviation for promotional flights. The irony of fate, the very airship that scared the press now carried the Goodyear Company logo on its side and flew over baseball games. Crowds waved at it from below, not knowing that this ship had once returned by itself, without people. But the veterans knew. One of those who participated in the search for Cody and Adams, Chief Petty Officer Harold Keene, said in an interview many years later, "When I first saw it over the city, my hands trembled. It was the same. Even the sound of the motor, the same. I understood then that machines remember. They remember better than people." The L-8 served for almost 20 more years. In 1962, it was finally decommissioned and dismantled. The envelope was burned, the parts sent to museums. But the engineers present during the dismantling later told a strange thing. Inside the gondola, under a layer of paint, they discovered an engraving, a small inscription, scratched with something sharp on the inner panel. "Hold the course." No one could explain who made it or when. After this, the legend only grew. Navy veterans passed it on to new generations as a warning. Never think the sky will let you go if you once promised it something. Today, the L-8 is part of history. Only photographs, a few gondola parts, and black and white footage from that day when the airship softly landed in Daly City remain in museums. But among pilots, a tale still circulates. On clear nights over the Pacific Ocean, you can see a dim silver spot moving without a sound, with a blinking red light under its belly. Sometimes, patrol pilots hear a crackle of old radio in their headphones and a faint voice lost in the air. Investigating slick, maintaining course. And then, silence. As if someone is flying their route again, without fear, without a body, without time, simply returning home.